Hi, good morning. This is Milani Douglas for another episode of Curative Collective. Today, I'm so excited to be in conversation with Jossie DaCosta Johnson. Jossie, how are you this morning?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I am doing really good. I have
Yay.
been excited about this conversation. For those who don't know, Jossie was a part of Reclamation. She was one of the artists that had presented such an intimate part of her cooking process as we looked at how the kitchen is also the studio and how these worlds blend and cross. And Jossie is also an interdisciplinary artist. I would love to first start off talking with you about your practice and give us some insight on how you got to your practice that combines dance and photography. So talk to us about it a bit.
So my practice, it's so singular, right? So I've been dance has been fueling my work for the last almost 3 decades now, and choreography. But I picked up a camera when I was 13. So um, not just still photography, but actually filming the body in motion was something that I became very passionate about in terms of creating forever work and creating movement on film. Um, and so, even though dance is at the base of most of what I do, documentary work and storytelling and telling the stories of pioneers of color within the ballet and modern world is part of what my focus is, but also really collaborating with a sense of telling something of history in a contemporary way without so much narrative storytelling through the body, because I'm a writer as well. So I get to exercise the narrative in one world and then also use the film and photography to exercise a different kind of narrative through the body. And right now, a lot of my narrative is about the return to the earth, connection to the earth. Reclamation was such a wonderful experience for me because I'm obsessed with mushrooms and actually, really understanding how we eat as consistent nourishment, not just eating because we're hungry, but eating always as a medicinal and ritual practice. Um, and so, yeah. So currently, I've been focusing on creating film work and telling stories that need to be told right now so that we can all seep more into connection with the earth and connection with each other through how we live, how we move, how we relate, and through almost reclaiming, to use that word, a sense of our connection to our history, ancestral memory, our connection to each other, yeah, through art.
What I loved about your piece with Reclamation is that it really did point out to what you were talking about, the um, eating for the ritual of it, but also the medicinal part of it, and the healing part. And I see that as a through line for your work, that it is not only just to create work, it's also, I love that term, forever work. It's something that is always replenishing and giving. And I would love to hear you just talk about how in your dance and how in your photography practice, like how does that healing element and that ritual element show up?
Um, well, interesting because uh, for me, getting out of company work and doing solo work and having the opportunity to collaborate in real time with musicians and visual artists and in spaces like museums, where we're surrounded by history told in a very different way. I realized that actually the act of performing live as a solo artist was ritual for me. It was always a listening to what needed to be said in that moment. Um, and the reason why I call my work forever work now is because there's an aspect to which, being born here in this place and time, how do we pass that on? The stage is so fleeting. And I've always, I loved touring, but I didn't like always performing to a sea of gray hair, and white faces, and in strange places, and not being able to share my work with and inspire my people and whoever that may be, but people who don't have access. Because my work is also about access. I come from a scholarship background, both academically and dance-wise, and being fortunate to be in a city where I had access to so many artists. So I think the healing aspect for me is being able to share more art and inspire, human beings, young people especially, to find their spiritual base in creation. Our wombs are our center of creation, and stripping the individual of a sense of power over what they create in the world is kind of what these systems have done. And so as an artist, it's like, what can I give back? I wanted something that gave back to the next generation. So putting it on film is one thing, but then also like, what are you saying on when you have that platform? So I hope that I'm, translating for the next generation some knowledge from past generations and from my personal experience, and also allowing them to, spread the knowledge. It's, film can be seen again. Photography can be interpreted in so many different ways, and it can hit you on levels that can't always be articulated. So.
Yeah. I love hearing how you're talking about history and passing on. Your work is also a contribution to a collective archives, but you are very clear about your personal archives as well. And I don't know if you have any samples that you could kind of talk to us about your personal archives.
Yeah.
How you document your own story, but I would love to see them and also hear you talk about
Yeah, I actually, yes, I have. So my current main project is writing my memoir. It started in 2020 when I finally had the chance to have all of my belongings from places I've lived, Rome, Rio, Harlem, Brooklyn, in one place after 30 years. And I'm a journaler. I've always been a journaler, and I've been a photographer since I was a young teenager. So discovering my journals and being able to look at what my eyes saw and what I was exposed to was incredibly inspiring. So I've been able to, on my own and also through work with a mentor of mine, Lana Turner, really look into the importance of our own archives and then how that tells the story in the now. So this one piece of about 50 journals that are part of this project is a journal from when I went out of the country for the first time. I was in boarding school, and senior year I had the opportunity to do a term abroad, and most people chose, all my siblings and I went to the same school. They chose the Dominican Republic, and I chose Egypt. And it was, I think it was just reinstated, the program, and we had to study Arabic to go, and it was an amazing and life-changing experience. And so I knew, because I said chapter 1 of the rest of my life.
I love it.
And basically going through these, I really had a lot of respect for young Jossie in terms of how I loved Prince. Okay, but in terms of how I was able to really see where I was and really see the space I was in and really travel in a curious way. And that traveler is really what inspired my life, my expat life, my international life. So these are all tickets from all of the different monuments we go to. And then, I realized I would sit in these places for hours and draw. One time I got in trouble. I got in trouble only one time. I stayed for 3 tours in the Giza pyramid. You have to go through this little tunnel up. And they were looking for me. And they're like, where's that Black girl? Because, of course, there's no other American Black girls around. So that's part of the remembering and reclaiming. I was 17 here. And it's just, also as a child with a camera, what I loved is how intimate I could get and how intimate I was with the people that I encountered. And I studied in a Quran study group in Alexandria before we traveled in Cairo and Luxor, so that I could just talk to people, because otherwise nobody would really talk to me on the street except when I was in the market. And so I'm really excited about being able to work on this memoir in a visual way, sharing these types of images. I don't know if you can see this little boy smoking in front of the pyramid. I absolutely love that one. And so, yeah, that was inspired, I think, time-wise, by a year of work that I did of archiving work with Lana Turner on a Harlem Renaissance project, studying the New Negro. And then quarantine happened, and I was surrounded basically by a memoir that I probably have already written. So I'm going through that now.
What a splendid act of self-love. And also, I think it's so important. I think there's a connection between the archives and archiving our work, and also encouraging value of yourself and your voice for women. That I would love to maybe later us toy, like what does that mean, and who needs that now, to possibly archive and tell our stories from our very personal perspectives. You mentioned Lana Taylor, and in how she got you into this archive piece from this angle for a whole other project, and then that brought you full circle back to Egypt, 17 years old. Tell us more about your relationship with her.
So, yeah, Lana Turner is a woman who she's called the Grande Dame of Harlem, really. She's known for her style. She is known for just kind of being like a Harlem queen. But really, she has a literary society for 39 years that she has helmed. And so we were, brought together by the forces of nature. Spirit honed me in on her, and I realized that, I walked into her house. I grew up in a house of 6 people, 3 bedrooms. 1 bedroom was all books. Okay, so I walked into her house, and it felt like that, and I realized, how important my literary connection is, and to be around people who have that. So she's really, she really validated me as a dancer as well. We'd come together and work on, hours and hours and books and filing and going through things and making plans and talks and discussions. And then, whenever she'd introduce me, she'd talk about my dance. So that is an example of what you were talking about in terms of how we validate our work and how we uplift ourselves and uplift each other, and how we use our life's path to inspire others. And she's been a huge inspiration to me, and as well as my mentor from grad school, who helped validate me as a photographer, Deb Willis. That was a really important thing for me, because I was actually given her as a life-saving technique by the white female choreographer, Dean of Tisch, who saw that I was dealing with sexism, racism, parentism, et cetera, in the department I was in. And so it was wonderful to be seen as an artist and be led to a thread of generational culture makers to help me along.
Well, there's some work that Lana Taylor has assigned you to, and that she has given room for you. Could you tell us about the piece that we're about to watch?
Yes. So this is a film that I completed this summer in collaboration with Bob Stewart, who's a tuba jazz player. He also is an educator at Juilliard for like 40 years. He's quite major jazz figure and historian. And it was a surprise commission that came out of my involvement with the Literary Society of Harlem. And so each month we read a book, or month and a half we read a book, and then we come together and speak about that book. And this was my first discussion. I'm one of the 3 youngest members. I think I'm the second youngest member in the group. And there's really very distinguished and educated elders. So I came together with Bob Stewart, and Lana asked us as artists to present a conversation on A Handful of Earth and A Handful of Sky, which is a book by Lynette George about Octavia Butler's process. Octavia E. Butler is one of my favorite authors. I think my first book I picked up of hers was maybe Wild Seed. I must have been like 12. And so, so now, and so I was really excited to understand, you know, what her thread was and how she got to fantasy and sci-fi and Afrofuturism and all of this. But instead the book was about her process. And the book was a visual book that showed her journals and would, you know, basically what I had done during 2020, going through her journals and showing pictures of it. I had found, you know, she had journals of her receipts and how much she needed for grocery, and basically encouraging herself to push through life's, you know, world issues and encourage herself. She would make contracts with herself. I'm going to write this much, this, da, da, da. And I would find those, I'd go back to my book and go, oh my God, I did that. I did that too. I used to make contracts. And so it was a wonderful experience for me. But what Lana did for the presentation was, in addition to our discussion about this book, ask us to do a art offering, she called it. So we made a dance film. And so Bob sent me some music and I did some dance, and then we communicated a few more times, and we showed the first iteration of it at the discussion. It was 2 minutes long. And at the end, everybody said, nope, we need more. And so this is the full dance film tribute to Octavia Butler, for commissioned by the Literary Society of Harlem.
Awesome. Let's watch.
If all of this is just an illusion, what is real? What is fiction? What is science fiction? What is life, if not?
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And once again, we see this continuum because on camera we have Luna, who is your magical star being daughter.
Yes, she's become my second camera since quarantine. I was like, oh, okay, here's the shot. Can you do that?
Yeah.
And then she'd do it. She's amazing. Yeah, this
10
is our
years
first
old.
film together. 10
First
years
film
old.
together, yes. And this is that passing it on. And do you encourage her to document and write her archives as well?
Yes, I do.
Tell us about that process.
So she's been journaling since she can write, you know, like 4 or 5 years old, which is great. And as well, once I really got into grad school with the camera, she'd go around with me and I'd give her a camera so that she could also capture through her eye. And I mean, she's a dancer. And so I always thought, okay, she's like me in that way, but she does have a very different eye. And so it's been a wonderful experience to kind of first play around with it, but then want to make work, want to do things during the pandemic, and saying, well, you know, she can shoot. Let's play, and it's really brought her confidence up as well, which is beautiful to see.
And you also have not only Luna, but you have other children. You have other dance children. You have students that you are passing on. Tell us how that works for you, how you're passing on in other ways, what's been passed on to you.
Yeah, so I'm really grateful that I was adopted for my first year in grad school by my first duet, the only 2 dancers in the school that I knew that could do it. And I was recreating a piece that I did, and it was a 7-minute duet with a lot of lifts. And I got them in the room and I realized, okay, you all don't know how to lift. And so we got to know each other really well and cut down a piece to 4 minutes. And in the end, they came to me after the first performance and asked me to be their spiritual dance mother. And dance mothering is something that happens. My mother says, she says, from the minute I went to Harlem School of the Arts at 13. And so from the minute you got into dance class, you had dance children. They could be a year younger than you. So, and what's really beautiful about it is that it, really was a spiritual connection. And it really was about helping them navigate this world of training as a dancer, which has changed a lot from when I've was training, but at the same time can be very focused on appearance, very focused on technique, very focused on shadeism, colorism, racism. I mean, I danced mostly in a company that toured. I toured for 9 years with a company, and they've never hired a Black girl as dark as me since the company's been around for almost 40 years, touring as the only Black person on tour sometimes. Or, maybe there was my best friend at the time, kind of big brother, was a Loation, I was like, okay, brother, Loation, so it's been wonderful because I have such a wonderful blended family now. My dance son, S-U-N, Maxfield, worked with Complexions. He's a contemporary ballet dancer. And now he works with Trocadero di Monte Carlo, which is really beautiful. He dances on point. And my dance daughter, Annalise, is working in Berlin. So kind of following my footsteps in terms of the expat life and expanding your perception of who you can be as a dancer in this changing world, and still have a grounding, a spiritual grounding, and connection, and intellectual grounding. And so they connected with me on that, and I'm grateful. And yes, I'm a professor, and I'm starting the first dance Bachelor's of Fine Arts program in the University of Virgin Islands, which is on the campus of St. Thomas and St. Croix. And I'm starting in St. Croix, and it's really beautiful because even in teaching basic humanities or theater classes, I get students who come to me because they say, Professor, you said something about Mercury being retro. What? Can we talk? And so I feel, that kind of sense of constant exchange, kind of being present in my life more and being necessary, because I learned so much from the generation of, my grown dance children, the 22 and 24-year-olds. They're, non-binary, and to be able to understand how we are returning in so many senses to an ancient understanding of who we are as human beings, man, woman, etc., is really beautiful. And I just started being a mentor for Girls Right Now, which is a national mentor program, and for women and identifying females. And it's just, it's really exciting to be able to do exactly what I've been getting later in life, but I wish I had a little younger, which was a direct someone to say, no, I don't care what you see out there. You be that one person that you see. You be that pioneer. It's okay if you don't have support, keep going. It's okay if they're not saying, yay, you're amazing, push. And so I'm excited for that exchange as well.
That's fantastic. And so tell us, how can we find more information about your work? We're definitely going to put your link at the screen. But how do we find you?
Yes. So my website is my full name, www.jossidacostajohnson.com, all lowercase. And I also have an Instagram, which is Ja Universal. My photography Instagram is Filming the Moving Body. And when I have news, I will put it up on these wonderful social media tools, even though I am an analog girl in this wonderful digital world.
Yes.
I'm still going to send out some written invitations for things. I think I'm bringing back letter writing.
Absolutely. It is a joy to send and receive letters. Jossie, it is a pleasure always to talk to you.
Such a pleasure, Milani. Thank you.
Work. Yes, so we have your IG at the bottom of the screen for anyone who's looking for her there, and then also her full name for her website. Please make sure when you look up Jossie DaCosta Johnson to include that D.
Yes, don't forget the D. And it's so interesting you say that before we close, because I gained confidence about my name. I'm named after Amir Karl Cabral. I always knew that. And he is a Cape Verdean and Guinea-Bissau political freedom fighter. And he was an African liberationist. And I always loved my name. But I found this in this journal, and I remember the exchange that I had with this man who made my cartouche and gave this to me and said, no, you don't understand. You're from here. Your name is original language. And look, if you can see, I don't know if I can do this right. I don't know. I'm not doing this right.
No, you're doing it right. You're doing it right.
Wait. Here we go.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, thank you. That's going to help me so much more. So if you can see the hieroglyphic dictionary, there's a DJ.
Ah,
You
I
see the
see
DJ?
it. Yes, I do.
How exciting is that? The
That's
alphabet. So
exciting.
at 17 years old, after being roll called, when nobody can pronounce my name, they'd say Dejasi. No, it's not Dejasi. Duh, like in junior high school, like I had to validate my name. That was a beautiful experience to return to the continent and see that
yourself.
on the walls.
Yes, yes, yes. That is beautiful. Well, we will definitely find time more to talk about this archiving process and just other things to talk about what is needed as we move into these changing times. And the Women Art and Social Change is really about moving our audience from arts into action and really being a part, an active part of changing this world that we're in and making it better for us all. And we know that when we make it better for women and we make it better for anyone that is on the fringes, we make it better for us all. But we need those voices. And I think the archives is a rich way to include those voices. So we'll talk more.
Thank you for letting me share about the archiving here. I really appreciate it. I always love speaking with you and this platform. So I really hope that we can disseminate information more to the collective. And I look forward to speaking with you again.
Yes, well, we're very creative. We'll find a way.
Yes, we will.
Thank you so much, Josie. Have a splendid day.
Thank you. Blessed day to you. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.